Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku defended Earth as the last Starfighter in an intergalactic war. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The chalk dust hung in the afternoon air like a lazy nebula, each mote a tiny, forgotten world catching the golden light slanting through the classroom windows. For Izuku Midoriya, it was just another Tuesday, which meant it was another day of existing as a ghost. The final bell had shrieked its metallic cry of freedom 10 minutes ago, but he remained at his desk, meticulously transferring notes from the board into his notebook. The subject was pre-Quirk era history, a topic most of his classmates found mind-numbingly dull, but Izuku found it fascinating. A world without powers, where ingenuity and spirit were the only measures of a person's potential. A world where he might have fit in. Still here, Midoriya? Izuku flinched, his pen scratching a jagged green line across the page. Mr. Aizawa's perpetually tired voice cut through the silence. His teacher, a man whose erasure quirk was as subtle and draining as his personality, stood by the door, looking at him with an expression that was less pity and more weary resignation. Just finishing up, sensei. Izuku mumbled, not meeting his eyes. He could feel the familiar heat rising in his cheeks. He was always the last one. It was easier that way, less chance of an encounter in the crowded hallways. Aizawa sighed, a sound like sandpaper on concrete. Don't forget the career choice forms are due Friday. Though I imagine yours hasn't changed. Izuku's hands tightened on his pen. He didn't need to look at the form. He had filled it out the day he received it, the same way he had filled out every career form since he was 4 years old. In the box marked first choice, he had written, in big, hopeful letters, hero. It was a laughable, pathetic fantasy, and he knew it. In a world where 80% of the population possessed some extraordinary ability, a quirk, he was one of the unlucky few born completely, utterly normal, quirkless. A blank slate in a world of vibrant canvases. To dream of being a hero without a quirk was like dreaming of flying without wings. Oh, Deku! Still pretending you have a future? That voice. It was like broken glass and dynamite, a sound that had haunted his every waking moment since childhood. Katsuki Bakugo stood in the doorway, framed like a nightmare. His uniform was immaculate, his posture radiating an arrogant confidence that seemed to suck the very air from the room. 2 of his cronies flanked him, snickering. Bakugo's gaze fell on the notebook on Izuku's desk. It wasn't his usual hero analysis for the future. This one was different. The cover was a deep, star-flecked blue, with the word Starfall, Frontier Tactical Analysis Volume 7 neatly printed on the front. With a speed that was almost quirk-like, Bakugo snatched it. What's this garbage? Still playing that stupid video game? I heard you're applying to the EDC Academy, Kaken. One of the cronies said, fawning. Of course I am. Bakugo sneered, flipping through Izuku's notebook. His crimson eyes scanned the pages filled not with hero costumes, but with complex ship schematics, energy weapon power outputs, and detailed flight patterns for alien fighters. It's the only place for a future ace like me. They'll be begging me to pilot their new plasmacore fighters, he scoffed, tossing the notebook back onto the desk. It landed with a pathetic thud. While I'm out there defending the planet, you'll be sitting in the dark, playing with your little toy ships. How fitting for a useless Deku. Deku. Useless. The name had been branded onto his soul. Izuku could only stare at his desk, his knuckles white. There was no point in talking back. Bakugo's quirk, explosion, allowed him to secrete nitroglycerin-like sweat and detonate it at will. He was a prodigy, a powerhouse destined for greatness. Izuku was a stepping stone, a pebble for Bakugo to kick on his path to glory. Let's go! Bakugo grunted, turning his back on Izuku as if he had already ceased to exist. Looking at him is ruining my appetite. As their laughter echoed down the empty hall, Izuku finally allowed himself to breathe. He slowly packed his bag, his movements stiff and robotic. The walk home was a blur of familiar sights and sounds that he barely registered. The taunts, the pitying looks, the sheer, suffocating weight of his own powerlessness. It was a poison he drank every day, but there was an antidote. His apartment was small, a cozy space filled with the scent of his mother's cooking and the comforting clutter of a life lived with love. Inko Midoriya greeted him with a gentle smile, though her eyes held a familiar flicker of worry. She saw the fresh layer of dust on his spirit, the way his shoulders slumped. She knew. "Tough day, sweetie?" she asked, her voice soft. "It was fine, Mom," he lied, forcing a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. He ate the katsudon she had prepared for him, his favorite, and answered her questions about school with vague non-answers. His mind wasn't there. It was already light years away. After dinner, he retreated to his room. It was a shrine to two worlds. One wall was plastered with posters of All Might, the beaming symbol of peace, a relic of a dream that was dying a slow, painful death. The other wall, however, was a star chart. Detailed schematics of the SF-01 Vindicator Starfighter were taped next to a leaderboard printout, and in the center of the room, like a high-tech altar, was his sanctuary, a slightly outdated but heavily modified full-dive VR rig. He slid the neural interface helmet over his head, the worn padding a familiar comfort. He secured the haptic gloves, feeling the faint electronic thrum against his skin. "System link active." A calm, feminine AI voice chimed in his ears. "Welcome back, pilot." The world dissolved. The posters, the bed, the suffocating smallness of his room, it all melted away into a cascade of light. When it reformed, he wasn't Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy. He was in the cockpit of the Inheritor, a prototype Gunstar from the popular VR MMO. Starfall Frontier. The game was his true reality. It was a hyper-realistic space combat simulator that had taken the world by storm. Millions played, but none played like him. Here, a quirk meant nothing. Reflexes were useful, but they weren't the deciding factor. What mattered was strategy. Analysis. The ability to process 1,000 variables at once, to predict an enemy's move 3 steps ahead, to know the precise structural weak point on a sardonic battlecruiser. Here, his obsessive note-taking, his mumbling analysis, his creepy attention to detail, they weren't weaknesses. They were superpowers. His call sign was simple, Deku. He had taken Bakugo's insult and owned it. In this world, it didn't mean useless. It meant you can do it. The cockpit was his real body. The cool, molded seat, the holographic displays flickering with shield statuses, energy levels, and targeting reticles. He could feel the low hum of the ship's reactor core through the floor plates. He gripped the twin flight sticks, his fingers finding their worn grooves. This was where he belonged. He checked the galactic server rankings. 1. Deku 9,874,550 PDS. 2. Kaibara_SCN 8,102,300 PTS. 3. Valkyrie_X 7,998,100 PTS. 78. KINGXPLO SIONMURDER 4,501,200 PTS. A small, genuine smile touched Izuku's lips. Bakugo was good, of course. His aggressive, overwhelming style made him a formidable opponent. But he was predictable. He relied on raw power. He never planned more than one step ahead. Izuku had defeated him in every one of their 17 simulated encounters. Tonight, however, he wasn't interested in dogfights. A new challenge had been issued by the game's developers a week ago. A legendary simulation, an unwinnable scenario that had burned out the server's top pilots for days. Special mission, the Kobayashi Maru Protocol. Scenario: defend the Ryland starport against a full-scale Void Dominion armada. Success rate 0%. Everyone said it was impossible. A publicity stunt. The armada was designed to be overwhelming, its numbers and firepower mathematically unbeatable for a single fighter. But Izuku had been studying it. For a week, he hadn't fought. He had watched. He had recorded every failed attempt by other top pilots, filled half a notebook with data, and cross-referenced it with the known specs of Dominion ships from the game's lore database. He saw a pattern. A flaw. A tiny, 1 in a million chance. He took a deep breath, the sterile, recycled air of the simulation filling his lungs. Computer, launch Kobayashi Maru Protocol. Affirmative, pilot. Good luck. The world outside his cockpit viewport shimmered and reformed. He was floating in the high orbit of a beautiful, blue-green planet. Below him, a massive, gleaming white space station, the Ryland starport, hung against the void. It was peaceful. Serene. Then, the universe tore open. A series of jagged, purple-black rifts materialized in space, spitting out ships like angry hornets. They weren't sleek or elegant. They were weapons, jagged asymmetrical vessels of obsidian metal, glowing with a sickly violet energy. The game's lore called them the Void Dominion. Reaper-class fighters, small and agile, swarmed out first, followed by hulking Ravager-class frigates. And at the center, a ship so massive it blotted out the stars, a Harbinger-class dreadnought. Warning, enemy fleet detected. Armada-class. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of panic. This was it. His console lit up with hundreds of hostile targets. A normal pilot would engage the fighters first. That was the mistake everyone made. They're a distraction, he mumbled, his voice a low, intense whisper. The Reapers are designed to draw your fire, make you waste energy while the Ravagers get into position. Their main cannons have a 4.7-second charge time, synchronized to fire in volleys of 3, but their ventral shield emitters are exposed during the pre-fire sequence. Ignoring the swarm of fighters screaming toward him, he pushed the throttle forward, diving straight for the frigates. The Inheritor groaned under the G-forces. Alarms blared as Reaper fire peppered his aft shields. Shields at 88%. Ignore it. Focus. His eyes scanned the 3 lead Ravagers. Just as his notes predicted, violet light began to coalesce around their massive ventral cannons. Now, he flicked a switch, diverting all power from rear shields to the main cannons. The ship shuddered. He had exactly 1.5 seconds to fire and evade. He lined up the shot, his targeting computer screaming to keep up with his calculations. He didn't fire at the ships themselves. He fired at the space between them. A bolt of pure, white-hot plasma screamed across the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, just as the Ravager's cannons fired, his plasma bolt detonated. The resulting electromagnetic pulse created a chain reaction. The 3 synchronized energy streams, suddenly unstable, collapsed inward. The lead Ravagers were engulfed in their own energy, exploding in silent, spectacular balls of violet fire. 3x Ravager class destroyed. Chain reaction bonus. A small victory, but the swarm was on him. His shields were failing. He pulled the stick hard, sending the Inheritor into a corkscrew dive through the new debris field, using the chunks of burning metal as cover. The Harbinger is the key, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. It acts as a command and control hub. If it goes down, the drone fighters lose their combat cohesion, but its shields are impenetrable. He had seen it in the data. For 0.3 seconds after the main cannon fires, the ship has to vent excess heat. For that split second, a single thermal exhaust port, no bigger than his fighter, opens just below the bridge. It was an impossible shot. A suicide run. He weaved through the chaotic dogfight, his movements a beautiful, deadly dance. He wasn't just flying, he was conducting a symphony of destruction. He knew the precise angle to hit a Reaper's engine housing to make it spin out and collide with its wingman. He knew how to use the gravitational pull of the nearby moon to slingshot himself behind an enemy patrol. He wasn't fighting with reflexes, he was fighting with his mind. Every move was calculated, every shot a conclusion to a complex equation. He took hits. His port engine was on fire. His main screen was cracked. The AI's voice was a constant, calm litany of his impending doom. Warning, hull integrity at 12%. Weapon systems offline. Shields failed. He had 1 shot left. All his energy was routed to the main cannon for a single, final blast. He pushed the battered Inheritor forward, straight into the teeth of the Dominion fleet, directly toward the monstrous dreadnought. The Harbinger's main cannon began to glow, a miniature sun of malevolent energy aimed squarely at the Ryland starport. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The cannon fired, a beam of incandescent rage that would have vaporized the station. But Izuku was ready. As the beam passed him, he dived into its wake, riding the turbulent energy like a surfer on a tidal wave. The heat was immense. His ship was literally melting around him, catastrophic hull failure imminent. He saw it. A tiny flicker of light. The exhaust port opened. His targeting computer was fried. He had to do it manually. He took a breath, the image of All Might's fearless smile flashing in his mind. You can do it. He squeezed the trigger. A single, needle-thin beam of white light shot from his ship, a final act of defiance. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat and vanished into the tiny port. For a second, there was only silence. The dreadnought hung in space, majestic and terrible. Then a ripple. A flicker of internal light. A chain of explosions erupted from within, tracing a path from the exhaust port straight to the bridge. The colossal ship convulsed, its violet lights flickering and dying. With a final, silent, cataclysmic explosion, the heart of the Dominion Armada shattered into a billion pieces of glittering dust. The remaining drone fighters, their command links severed, flew aimlessly for a moment before turning and retreating back into their black rifts. Silence returned. Izuku floated in the wreckage of his ship, the Ryland starport safe below him. He was breathing heavily, his entire body trembling with adrenaline. His vision began to fade as the simulation ended. The last thing he saw was the text that scrolled across his screen. Mission complete. Survival, unprecedented. New galactic high score, 15,452,700 PTS. The VR helmet came off with a hiss. He was back in his room. He was drenched in sweat, his heart still trying to beat its way out of his chest. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He had done it. He had achieved the impossible. For one fleeting moment, he had been a hero. The greatest hero in the galaxy. A feeling of pure, unadulterated triumph washed over him, a feeling so rare and precious it brought tears to his eyes. Suddenly, a strange, low hum vibrated through the floor. The lights in his room flickered violently. His All Might figurines rattled on their shelves. A deep, resonant thrumming sound grew louder, coming from outside. It sounded like 1,000 bass guitars playing a single, world-shaking note. Izuku? His mother called from the living room, her voice tight with alarm. What was that? Is that an earthquake? I don't know, Mom! He called back, scrambling to his feet and rushing to his window. He pulled back the curtains and his breath caught in his throat. The streetlights of their quiet suburban neighborhood were flickering on and off, casting eerie, dancing shadows. Neighbors were poking their heads out of their windows, pointing at the sky. Izuku looked up. Descending from the clouds, silent as a ghost, was something that did not belong. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It was a vehicle, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was shaped like a polished river stone, a seamless teardrop of a metal that seemed to drink the light around it, shifting between silver and black. There were no visible seams, no rivets, no engines. It moved with an unnatural grace, defying gravity as it settled softly in the middle of their street, its landing struts extending with a quiet sigh of pneumatics. Awe and terror warred in Izuku's chest. It was beautiful. It was impossible. It looked familiar. He had seen ships like it before, in the concept art for Starfall, Frontier, the scout ships of the Ryland Star League. No, it can't be, he whispered, his mind refusing to make the connection. This had to be some kind of elaborate prank. A marketing stunt by the game company to celebrate his high score. Yes, that had to be it. A ramp descended from the side of the craft, bathing the asphalt in a soft, white light. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the glow. It wasn't human. It was tall and slender, wrapped in a form-fitting, silvery uniform. As it stepped into the flickering glow of the streetlights, Izuku could see its features more clearly. Its skin was a mosaic of fine, iridescent scales, like a lizard's, shifting from deep indigo to emerald green. Its head was elongated, with two large, intelligent, black eyes that had double-lidded pupils, blinking sideways. It had no discernible nose, only two small slits, and its mouth was a thin, straight line. The being's gaze swept across the bewildered faces of the neighbors before locking onto Izuku's window. It seemed to look right through the glass, right into his very soul. It raised a three-fingered hand and pointed directly at him. The doorbell rang. The sound was so mundane, so normal, it was utterly jarring. Izuku was frozen, his blood like ice in his veins. His mother, however, spurred by a protective instinct that transcended fear of the unknown, was already moving. Stay here, Izuku! She commanded, her voice trembling but firm. She grabbed the heaviest frying pan from the kitchen and crept toward the door. Mom, no, wait! Izuku whispered hoarsely, but it was too late. He heard the click of the lock, the creak of the door opening a few inches. He heard his mother's sharp intake of breath. Can I help you? Inko Midoriya asked, her voice a testament to the iron will of mothers everywhere. A voice replied, strangely melodic but filtered through what sounded like a translator. My apologies for the intrusion. My name is Xyler. I am looking for the one they call Deku. Izuku's world tilted on its axis. He stumbled out of his room and into the entryway. There, standing on his doorstep, was the alien. It was even taller up close, its presence filling the small space with an aura of ancient authority and desperation. Inko stood between them, a small, fierce woman wielding a frying pan against a visitor from the stars. Xyler's large, black eyes shifted from Inko to Izuku. A flicker of something, recognition, relief, crossed its features. The thin line of its mouth curved into what Izuku guessed was a smile. Ah, the alien said, its voice resonating with a strange gravity. There you are. Izuku could only stare, his mind a maelstrom of confusion. This is a joke, right? A promotion for the game? Did I win something? Xyler tilted its head, a gesture of confusion that was surprisingly human. Game? It seemed to process the word. Ah, the simulation. The recruiting tool, an ingenious method of filtering billions of candidates across uncharted worlds to find the one with the requisite neural aptitude. Recruiting tool? Izuku stammered, his heart beginning a frantic, panic tattoo against his ribs. What are you talking about? The alien took a step forward. Inko raised the frying pan defensively. Xyler paused, holding up its hands in a universal gesture of peace. Your final test, Xyler said, its eyes fixed on Izuku. The Kobayashi Maru Protocol. The simulation of the Void Dominion's assault on the Ryland starport. No one has ever survived it. No one has ever defeated the Armada. Until now. The alien's expression grew somber, the faint light of hope in its eyes dimming to a desperate ember. The Ryland Star League is on the brink of extinction. Our pilots are gone. Our fleet is shattered. The Void Dominion is a plague that consumes entire worlds, and our home is next. Xyler's gaze was piercing, heavy with the weight of 1,000 dying suns. It looked at Izuku, not as a quirkless boy, not as a high school student, but as something else entirely. As a weapon. As a savior. Greetings, Starfighter, Xyler said, its voice echoing in the sudden, profound silence of the night. You have been recruited to defend the frontier against the Void Dominion. It paused, letting the impossible words hang in the air between them. Izuku's mind reeled, trying to grasp the sheer, universe-altering magnitude of what he was hearing. He thought of his notebooks, his dreams, the taunts, the soul-crushing reality of his life. And then he looked at the alien, at the impossible ship parked on his street, and a terrifying, exhilarating, unbelievable thought began to form. Xyler's final words landed not like a proposition, but like a verdict. And the war is real. The words hung in the air of the small apartment entryway, heavier than any physical weight, bending the very fabric of reality around them. The war is real. For a long, silent moment, the only sound was the frantic thumping of Izuku's own heart. A frantic drumbeat against the sudden, shocking silence of his suburban street. His mind, usually a supercomputer of analysis and branching possibilities, had just blue-screened. It cycled through a single, repeating error message: does not compute. Does not compute. Does not compute. Inko Midoriya, however, recovered first. Her maternal instinct, a force more potent than any quirk, surged past the shock. She tightened her grip on the frying pan, her knuckles white. War? She repeated, her voice a dangerous whisper. You are not taking my son to any war. He's a child. He has school. He hasn't finished his homework. The last part came out as a desperate, trembling justification, a mother clinging to the mundane in the face of the cosmically terrifying. Xyler's large, black eyes softened with an expression that transcended species, empathy. Madam, he began, his translated voice gentle, I understand your fear. It is the most logical response, But the logic of our situation is dire. The Void Dominion does not negotiate. It does not stop. If we fail, the silence that has fallen over 1,000 worlds will eventually come for this one. Your son is not being taken. He is being asked? Asked to give worlds like yours a chance to continue having homework to finish. Izuku's brain finally rebooted. The implications crashed into him like a tidal wave. The game. The ships. The lore. The Dominion's insatiable hunger, described in the flavor text he'd always thought was just for dramatic effect. It wasn't a story. It was a history. A horrifying, ongoing history. The Zardonic Empire, the Kthar Collective, were they real? Izuku asked, his voice barely a squeak. He was reciting the names of fallen civilizations from the game's codex. A profound sadness crossed Xyler's features. They were founding members of the Ryland Star League. Their worlds are now dark. Their stars are cold. We are all that is left. That single statement shattered the last of Izuku's denial. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a dream. This was happening. He, Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless, useless Deku, was being asked to fight in a real intergalactic war. A part of him, the small, frightened child who still hid from Bakugo's explosions, screamed at him to run, to hide, to slam the door and pretend this was a hallucination. But another part of him, the part that filled notebooks with hero analysis, the part that threw itself in front of a sludge monster to save a friend who hated him, the part that had just single-handedly saved a virtual starport against impossible odds. That part stirred. It was a tiny, flickering flame of heroic instinct, but in the face of this galactic darkness, it felt blindingly bright. He looked at his mother, at her terrified, defiant face, and he saw what he would be fighting for. He looked at Xyler, at the weary desperation in those ancient eyes, and he saw the stakes. He started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. If I go, can I save them? Can I really make a difference? We do not have definitive data on success probabilities, Xyler said with painful honesty. But your performance in the simulation indicates a strategic and cognitive potential unseen in generations. You are not a guaranteed victory. You are a variable. The first new variable in a losing equation for a very long time. You are our only hope. Hope. The word resonated within Izuku's soul. It was the one thing he'd been starved of his entire life. He turned to his mother. Mom! Inko's face crumpled. The tears she had been holding back finally streamed down her cheeks. Izuku, no. Please! You're all I have. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her shoulder. She smelled of home, of safety, of everything he was about to leave behind. I have to, he whispered, his own tears soaking her blouse. Don't you see? It's everything I've ever wanted. A chance to help people. A chance to be a hero. If there's even a small chance I can protect you, and everyone else, by doing this, I have to take it. He was terrified. More terrified than he had ever been in his life. But beneath the terror was a bedrock of resolve he didn't know he possessed. For the first time, someone wasn't telling him he couldn't be a hero. They were telling him he was the only one who could. He pulled away, his face set with a determination that made him look older than his 15 years. He looked at Xyler. I'll do it. A wave of palpable relief washed over the alien. Thank you, Starfighter. Your sacrifice will be remembered. It's not a sacrifice if it's a choice, Izuku said, echoing a line he'd once heard All Might say in an interview. We must leave immediately, Xyler urged, his tone shifting back to one of urgency. The Dominion could detect our ship's energy signature if we remain in a populated system for too long. Wait, Izuku said, a sudden thought striking him. He darted back to his room, his mind racing. He couldn't just vanish. He grabbed a pen and a page from a notebook. What could he possibly write? How do you explain to your friends, to your school, that you've left to fight in a space war? He scribbled frantically, his hand shaking. Mom, I'm sorry. I know this is crazy, but I have to go. It's like the ultimate hero work-study program. A chance to do something important. Please don't worry. The person I'm with, Xyler, he'll keep me safe. I'll be back. I promise. Tell everyone I've gone to study abroad. A very, very far abroad program. I love you more than anything. Be brave. Your hero, Izuku. It was clumsy, inadequate, but it was all he could manage. He left it on his pillow, next to his favorite All Might figurine, a silent guardian for a dream he was leaving behind to chase a new, impossibly real one. He took one last look around his room, the posters, the star charts, the VR rig that had started it all. He was leaving his entire world behind. He walked back to the entryway, took his mother's hands, and squeezed them tight. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my sweet boy. She sobbed, holding on as if she could physically prevent him from leaving. Be safe. Please just be safe. Letting go was the hardest thing he had ever done. He turned and walked with Xyler out the door, not daring to look back, knowing that if he did, he would never be able to leave. The cool night air felt alien on his skin. The neighbors were still out, phones held up, recording the impossible sight of a boy from their quiet street walking aboard an alien spacecraft. Izuku saw their faces, a mixture of fear, wonder, and utter confusion. He felt a pang of connection to them, to the simple, quirk-filled world he was leaving. The ramp of the Ryland scout ship retracted with a soft hum, sealing him inside. The interior was nothing like the hard, utilitarian cockpits of the game. The walls were smooth, pearlescent curves, glowing with a soft, internal light. There were no chairs, but rather contoured couches that seemed to grow out of the floor. The air was clean and smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something like damp earth after a rainstorm. Please take a seat. Xyler gestured to one of the couches. As Izuku sat, it molded perfectly to his form. A soft, glowing harness of light extended from the couch and enveloped him, holding him gently but firmly in place. Through the teardrop-shaped viewport, Izuku saw his home, his street, his life, for the last time. He saw the small figure of his mother standing in the doorway, a silhouette of love and grief. Then, with a sensation not of movement, but of the world receding from them, the ship lifted silently into the sky. The houses shrank, the city became a grid of lights, and soon, the whole of Japan was a gentle curve against the darkness. The ship ascended through the atmosphere with none of the shuddering violence of a human rocket launch. In moments they were in orbit, hanging in the silent majesty of space. Earth. It was a perfect, swirling marble of blue, white, and green. More beautiful and fragile than any picture could convey. He could see the lights of cities tracing the continents, tiny sparks of life against the infinite void. This is what he was fighting for. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Prepare yourself, Starfighter, Xyler said from the pilot's couch. The journey to Starbase Epsilon is disorienting for first-time travelers. Before Izuku could ask what he meant, Xyler placed his three-fingered hand on a smooth, unmarked console. The space outside the viewport seemed to fold. The stars, which had been sharp, distant points, elongated into streaks of blue and white light. The familiar reality of three-dimensional space dissolved. Izuku felt a bizarre sensation, as if his entire being were being pulled through the eye of a needle. His vision blurred into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and geometric patterns. He wasn't just moving through space. He felt like he was experiencing all of space, all at once. He saw nebulas bloom and die in an instant, heard the ghost of a symphony played on strings of cosmic energy, and felt the weight of 1,000 gravities press down on him. It was overwhelming, a total sensory assault that threatened to tear his consciousness apart. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the couch, his mind reeling. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The chaotic light show snapped back into the familiar vista of stars on black velvet. Izuku gasped, his lungs burning. He felt nauseous, dizzy, and utterly drained. That, he panted, was hyperspace? A crude but effective translation, yes, Xyler confirmed. A folding of space-time. We have crossed several thousand light years. Welcome to the Aldebaran sector. We are on the edge of the frontier. The view outside was different now. The stars were thicker, brighter. A massive, blood-red nebula swirled in the distance like a cosmic storm. And dead ahead, nestled within a dense field of asteroids, was their destination. It wasn't a gleaming station like the one in his simulation. It was a rock. A massive, pockmarked asteroid kilometers in diameter that had been hollowed out. Lights glittered from within deep craters, and tiny ships, fighters and transports, flitted in and out of hidden hangar bays like metallic insects. It was camouflaged, functional, and looked less like a headquarters and more like a last, desperate hideout. Their scout ship slipped through a shimmering energy field that flickered into existence between two smaller asteroids and flew into a vast, cavernous hangar bay. The interior was a maelstrom of organized chaos. The air was thick with the smells of hot metal, ozone, and 100 alien spices. The noise was a constant din of engines, machinery, and languages that sounded like clicks, chimes, and guttural growls. Beings of every imaginable shape and size moved with purpose. Hulking, insectoid mechanics with multiple limbs worked on the battered hulls of starfighters. Graceful, crystalline beings floated through the air, directing traffic with gestures of their light-filled appendages. A short, furry creature with 6 eyes chattered orders into a communications device. They all looked exhausted. Their movements were efficient, but lacked energy. Their faces, or what passed for faces, were etched with a deep, collective weariness. As Xyler led a stumbling, wide-eyed Izuku down the ramp, a hush fell over the immediate area. The work didn't stop, but dozens of eyes turned toward them. Toward him. He saw curiosity, skepticism, and in a few of them, a tiny, dangerous flicker of hope. He was the new variable. The rumor. The pilot who broke the unbeatable simulation. Izuku had never felt so out of place in his life. He was a scrawny, quirkless human teenager in a room full of battle-hardened aliens. He instinctively hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself smaller, his heart hammering against his ribs. The weight of their gazes, of their desperate hope, was suffocating. "They have been waiting for you," Xyler said, his voice low. "For the arrival of the last Starfighter." "Last?" Izuku whispered, the words sending a chill down his spine. "What happened to the others? The war has been long, and the Dominion is thorough," Xyler said grimly, leading him through the bustling corridors of the starbase. The walls were bare, unadorned metal, scarred and dented in places. Pipes and conduits ran along the ceiling like metallic veins. It was a place built for survival, not comfort. "Our best pilots, the veterans of 100 battles, were hunted down. The Dominion learns. It adapts. It prioritizes the elimination of threats. Our Starfighter Corps was reduced to 1 active pilot. He fell defending the escape of the refugee fleet from the Siren system. They stopped before a massive, reinforced blast door." Xyler placed his hand on a scanner, and the door hissed open, revealing a much smaller, quieter hangar. And there it was. It was everything he had dreamed of and more. Sleeker, deadlier, and far more real than the VR model. The prototype Gunstar. Its hull was a composite of dark, non-reflective alloys angled for stealth. Twin-engine pods flared out from the main body, and its forward-swept wings were bristling with weapon emplacements. It looked less like a machine and more like a predator, poised and waiting. Scorch marks and tiny micrometeoroid impacts scarred its surface, speaking of a history written in fire and violence. A name was stenciled in a blocky, alien script on the side of the cockpit, and below it, in a standard galactic alphabet, Inheritor. "Beautiful, is she not?" Xyler said with a reverence that was almost religious. "The last of her kind. The pinnacle of Rylan technology, a perfect synthesis of pilot and machine." Izuku could only stare, his mouth agape. This was his ship. His Excalibur. The tool with which he was meant to save the galaxy. It was the most terrifying and wonderful thing he had ever seen. "All this advanced technology," Izuku breathed. "The hyperspace drive, this ship, why are you losing? The Dominion does not innovate," came a new voice, sharp and laced with a cynical rasp. "It assimilates. But their true strength is numbers. They are a tide of locusts that blots out the sun. For every ship we build, they can spawn 100. For every pilot we train, they have 1,000,000 mindless drones. You can't out-strategize a flood, kid. You can only hope to build an ark before you drown." Izuku turned. Leaning against the Gunstar's landing strut was the source of the voice. She was humanoid, but taller than Izuku, with skin the color of slate gray, overlaid with sections of smooth, black chitinous plating on her shoulders, forearms, and shins. Her face was sharp and angular, with high cheekbones and intelligent, piercing silver eyes that seemed to miss nothing. A shock of short, white hair was swept to one side, but the most striking feature was her arms. She had 4 of them. The upper pair were crossed over her chest, while one of the lower hands casually polished a wicked-looking combat knife with a rag. She wore a stained, well-worn flight suit, and her entire posture radiated a dangerous, coiled competence. "Izuku Midoriya," Xyler said formally. "This is your tactical officer and gunner, Kalen." Kalen's silver eyes raked over Izuku from head to toe, her expression a perfect mask of unimpressed scrutiny. "This is it?" she said, her voice dripping with scorn. She gestured at him with the knife. "The savior of the galaxy? The grand hero from the primitive world? He looks like he'd lose a fight with a stiff breeze." Izuku flinched, the familiar sting of being underestimated a bitter taste in his mouth. He was used to it from Bakugo, but hearing it from a 4-armed alien warrior was somehow worse. "Kalen's tactical acumen is second to none," Xyler said, a warning edge to his tone. "She is the finest gunner we have left, and the only one crazy enough to volunteer for this suicide mission." Kalen shot back, not taking her eyes off Izuku. She straightened up, her movements fluid and precise. "I've seen the reports from your simulation. Fancy flying. Cute tricks. But out here, there are no resets. There's no respawn point. There's just the cold, the dark, and a billion ways to die." She stepped closer, invading his personal space. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the deep, painful memories that swam behind the cynicism. "My world was called Cygnus X1, she said, her voice dropping to a low, cold monotone. "It was beautiful. We had crystalline forests that sang in the wind. The Dominion harvested it. That's the word they use. They cracked the planet open and drank its core. I was off-world, running patrol. I was the only one who made it out." She leaned in, her silver eyes boring into his. "So don't think for one second that I'm here because I believe in you. I'm here because this ship is the only weapon left that can hurt them enough to matter, and you just happen to be the key that turns the ignition. You are a component. A means to an end." She backed away, her point made. The hangar felt suddenly cold. I'm sorry about your world," Izuku managed to say, his voice small. Kalen just snorted, a sharp, humorless sound. "Save your pity. It's a useless currency out here." She turned and slapped a panel on the Inheritor's hull. A cockpit canopy hissed open, revealing 2 seats, one in front of the other, embedded in a dizzying array of holographic projectors and neural interface ports. She looked back at Izuku, her expression bleak. "I've seen them send out heroes before. Young, hopeful pilots ready to save the universe. I've seen them burn up in atmospheres and get torn apart by Reaper swarms. To the Dominion, you're not a hero. You're just fresh meat." She paused, her silver eyes holding his, offering not a shred of comfort or hope. "So, welcome to the war, kid," she said, her voice flat and final. "Try not to get us both killed. The Ryland Star League has lost enough promising saviors." With that, she effortlessly hoisted herself up and into the rear gunner's seat. Izuku was left standing on the hangar floor, the immense, silent Gunstar on one side, and the crushing weight of Kalen's words on the other. He was no longer just a boy playing a game. He was a component. A key. A variable. And to his new partner, the one who would hold his life in her 4 hands, he was just another lamb for the slaughter. The simulation chamber was a stark contrast to the chaotic, living hangar. It was a sterile, circular room, the walls a smooth, featureless white. In the center, mounted on a complex gyroscopic armature, was the cockpit of the Inheritor. It was a self-contained unit, detached from the Starfighter's main body, a metal chrysalis wired with 1,000 fiber-optic cables that snaked across the floor like silver roots. This was where pilots were made or broken. Izuku stood before it, clad in a form-fitting black flight suit that felt like a second skin. It was thin but surprisingly heavy, threaded with microservos and biomonitors. Kalen stood beside him, arms crossed over her chest, her expression as unreadable as a locked data slate. Xyler observed from a raised control booth, his scaled features betraying a hint of anxious anticipation. "The physical stresses of a Gunstar are considerable," Xyler's voice echoed through the chamber's comms system. The neural link alone can be overwhelming. This simulation will acclimate you to the G-forces and the sensory data stream before you attempt a true flight. Translation: try not to throw up in the new upholstery. Kaylin muttered, her voice a low rasp in Izuku's ear. I just got it cleaned. Izuku swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He felt a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach, but he pushed it down. This was it. The real thing. He had mastered the simulation on Earth, a simulation Xyler himself had called a recruiting tool. This was just the next level. He could do this. He had to do this. He climbed into the forward pilot's seat. It was a perfect fit, the same worn contours he knew from 1,000 hours of VR. But the reality of it was infinitely more potent. He could feel the cold metal through his suit, smell the faint, electric scent of the onboard computer core. Kaylin settled into the gunner's seat behind him with the practiced ease of someone who had spent half her life in a cockpit. The canopy hissed shut, sealing them in a world of holographic light. Link sequence initiated. Kaylin's voice was all business, her cynical edge sharpened to a professional point. Neural interface is online. Just relax, Earthboy. Let the ship do the work. It knows what it's doing, even if you don't. Izuku placed his hands on the twin flight sticks, the cool, worn grips of familiar comfort. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, just like he always did. The projectors around them hummed to life, and the sterile white room was replaced by a perfect, 360-degree starfield. A simple asteroid field, the training scenario. Okay, Izuku whispered to himself. Just like the game, a soft chime indicated the neural link was active. And then it began. It was not the gentle data flow of his VR rig. This was a fire hose of information forced directly into his consciousness. He wasn't just seeing the sensor readings on a screen, he was feeling them. The mass of every asteroid, the faint radiation from a distant pulsar, the gravitational pull of their own tiny starbase. It all flooded his mind, a cacophony of raw data that had no context, no order. It was like trying to listen to a million conversations at once. Error. Sensory input overload. Calibrating. A cold, robotic voice echoed, not in his ears, but inside his skull. He gritted his teeth, fighting the overwhelming surge. He tried to focus, to push the excess data away and concentrate on flying. He pushed the throttle forward. The gyroscopic armature outside whined, and the cockpit lurched violently. This was no gentle simulation. The G-forces slammed him back into his seat, a physical, crushing weight that stole the air from his lungs. His vision began to tunnel, the brilliant starfield shrinking into a pinprick of light surrounded by a gray haze. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from excitement, but from sheer physical strain. Compensate for your G-load, rookie! Kaylin snapped from behind him. Your breathing is erratic. Control it, or you'll black out. He tried to draw a steadying breath, but his body wouldn't obey. His hands felt like lead on the controls. The ship was responding to his inputs, but sluggishly, as if he were trying to steer a whale with a fishing rod. It felt wrong. Disconnected. Okay, simple slalom. Weave through the larger asteroids. Show me you can at least point this thing in the right direction. Kaylin instructed, her tone bored. Izuku lined up the first asteroid, a large, pockmarked behemoth. In the game, he could dance around something like this, using its gravity to execute a perfect, high-speed slingshot. He banked the ship to the right. The inheritor responded with a sickening lurch. He had overcompensated. The ship veered wildly, its port wing scraping against the asteroid's surface. A screech of tortured metal and a violent shudder ran through the cockpit. Red warning lights flared to life across his console. Warning, port wing shield at 30%. Minor hull breach detected. Watch your flank. Kaylin barked. Did that high score of yours come with a pilot's license, or did you find it in a cereal box? Your energy distribution is a mess. You're bleeding power from the dorsal shields to compensate for a turn you botched 10 seconds ago. Panic began to set in. The data stream was a screaming chaos in his head. The G-forces were making him nauseous. Kaylin's voice was a constant, grating critique. He felt like he was fighting the ship, every movement a struggle against an unwilling, colossal beast. He tried another maneuver, a simple roll to avoid a cluster of smaller rocks. His input was clumsy. The cockpit spun violently, and a wave of vertigo washed over him. He gagged, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. He saw the starfield smear into incomprehensible lines of light. He was no longer flying. He was just a passenger in a tumbling metal coffin. That's enough. Kalen's voice was cold and final. Simulation off. The starfield vanished, replaced by the sterile white walls of the chamber. The G-forces ceased, leaving Izuku feeling strangely light and profoundly sick. The canopy hissed open, and the cool, recycled air of the chamber felt like a blessing. He slumped in his seat, chest heaving, his body trembling. He had failed. Not just failed, but failed spectacularly. He couldn't even complete the most basic training exercise. Kalen was already out of her seat, her lithe form moving with an agility that belied her frustration. She stood by the side of his cockpit, looking down at him not with anger, but with a flat, crushing disappointment. "The simulation back on your world must have been a toy," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier sharp edges, now just weary. "It taught you the pictures, the shapes of the enemy. It never taught you how to breathe. How to feel the machine. You're fighting it, kid. And this ship? It will always win that fight." She turned and walked away without another word. The silence she left behind was more damning than any insult. Izuku slowly, shakily, unbuckled himself and climbed out of the cockpit. His legs felt like jelly. He avoided looking up at the control booth, unable to face Xyler. He felt the weight of every alien eye that had looked at him with hope, and it was a physical stone in his gut. He was a fraud. A high-score hero who couldn't handle the real thing. Kalen was right. He was just a kid who played a video game, a useless Deku who had somehow managed to fool the entire galaxy. His assigned quarters were a small, hexagonal room carved out of the asteroid's rock. The walls were bare metal, the bed a simple recessed bunk, and the only furniture was a small desk and a chair that grew out of the floor. There were no windows. It was a cell, a perfect reflection of his own isolation. He sat on the edge of the bunk, his head in his hands. The shame was a physical ache, a burning in his chest that made it hard to breathe. He had left his home, his mother, his entire life, on the basis of a lie. A high score. What was he thinking? That he could just hop into an advanced alien starfighter and save the universe? Bakugo's sneering face swam in his mind's eye. "While I'm out there defending the planet, you'll be sitting in the dark, playing with your little toy ships." It turned out Bakugo was right all along. A soft chime emanated from the terminal on his desk. He ignored it. It chimed again, more insistent this time. With a weary sigh, he dragged himself over to the desk. The screen was displaying a secure incoming comms request message, written in Ryland script, but a small, familiar logo was flashing in the corner. A stylized red, white, and blue crest with two tufts that looked like rabbit ears. The All Might logo. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. With a trembling finger, he touched the accept icon. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It wasn't the broad, perpetually smiling face of the symbol of peace. It was the other one. The true one. Toshinori Yagi looked out from the screen, his form skeletal, his eyes sunken into deep, dark sockets. He was in what looked like a dimly lit command center, the glow of other monitors reflecting off his gaunt features. He looked tired, older than Izuku had ever seen him. "Midoriya, my boy." Toshinori's voice was a weak rasp, but it was the most welcome sound Izuku had ever heard. "Xyler patched me through. He told me the first session didn't go as planned." The shame came rushing back, hot and acidic. Izuku couldn't meet his hero's eyes, even on a screen. "I couldn't do it, All Might," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I failed. The ship, it's too much. The G-forces, the data. I can't control it." Kalen was right. "I'm just a kid who played a game." A deep, rattling cough shook Toshinori's frame. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief before continuing. "You failed because you were trying to control it," he said, his voice gentle. "That was my mistake, too, a long time ago." Izuku looked up, confused. "Your mistake?" A sad smile touched Toshinori's lips. "Did Xyler not tell you? Earth has had a starfighter candidate before. Decades ago. a young brash pilot in the fledgling Earth Defense Corps, full of power and convinced he could punch his way through any problem. He gestured to his own emaciated form. I was that candidate. The world tilted again. All Might, the symbol of peace, Earth's mightiest hero, had been a Starfighter candidate. I was chosen for the same reason you were. Tashinori continued, his gaze distant, lost in memory. Aptitude. But my quirk, one for all, interfered with the neural link. The Gunstar had its own legacy, its own power. The two clashed. During an early skirmish with the Void Scout, a single, lone ship, the feedback loop was catastrophic. It tore my body apart from the inside. He gestured vaguely to his side. The injury that limits my time as a hero, it wasn't from a villain on Earth. It was from the stars. Izuku was speechless. The entire history of his world, of his hero, was being rewritten before his eyes. I was forced to retire from the program, Tashinori said, his voice laced with old pain. But I knew Earth would need a defender. Not just from terrestrial threats. I convinced the Star League to leave a recruitment tool behind. A simulation that wouldn't test for power, or reflexes, but for the one thing I lacked back then, a true hero's heart. A mind that analyzed, that sought to understand, that valued strategy over strength. I've been watching your progress for years, my boy. Your notes, your mumbling analysis, your score on the Kobayashi Maru wasn't why you were chosen. It was the proof. The proof that you had what it takes. But I don't! Izuku cried, gesturing wildly with his hands. I couldn't even fly in a straight line, because you misunderstand the power you are trying to wield, Tashinori said, leaning closer to the screen, his voice gaining a spark of its old fire. Xyler calls the ship the Inheritor. The name is literal. The cockpit's core contains a living database, the collective combat data, neurofeedback, instincts, and battle experiences of every ace pilot who has ever flown a Gunstar. Hundreds of them. Rylan, Signian, Kthar, a league of heroes. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. That is the true nature of One for All in this war, young Midoriya. It is not a quirk to be mastered. It is a legacy to be accepted. You are one pilot, trying to conduct a chorus of 100 heroic souls. When you entered that cockpit, you tried to shout over them, to force your will upon them. You tried to win a game. But they are not a tool for winning. They are a shield for protecting. A flicker of understanding lit in Izuku's mind. The screaming chaos of the data stream. It wasn't just noise. It was voices. Experiences. When you failed, Tashinori continued, his eyes piercing Izuku's. What were you thinking about? Izuku thought back. I was thinking about the maneuvers, about not messing up, about proving to Kalen that I wasn't useless. You were thinking about yourself. Tashinori finished gently. That is not a failing. It is human. But the legacy of the Inheritor responds to something greater. It is a torrent of power that can only be channeled by a selfless heart. The will to save others is the only lens that can bring that chaos into focus. It is not about raw power, or perfect control. It is about your resolve to protect. A quality I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that you have in abundance. The words struck Izuku like a physical blow. All his life, his desire to help, his self-sacrificing nature, had been treated as a weakness. A liability for someone quirkless. But All Might, his hero, was telling him it was the key. It was his greatest strength. Go back, my boy, Tashinori urged, his voice filled with an unwavering belief that seemed to flow through the screen and into Izuku's very soul. Get back in that cockpit, and this time, don't think about flying. Don't think about fighting or winning. Think about your mother's smile. Think about your home, that beautiful blue marble hanging in the void. Think about all the people you want to protect. Become the shield. And the pilots of the past, they will become your sword. The screen went blank, leaving Izuku alone in the silence of his room. But he was no longer alone. He felt a profound shift inside him. The crushing weight of his failure was replaced by a fragile, but fierce, new resolve. He stood up. He walked out of his quarters and down the cold, metal corridors, his footsteps echoing with a purpose they hadn't had before. He didn't walk like a gamer or a scared kid. He walked like a pilot. he entered the simulation chamber. Kalen and Xyla were there, engaged in a quiet, tense conversation that stopped the moment he entered. Kalen looked at him. Her silver eyes narrowed, ready for an excuse or an apology. "I want to try again," Izuku said, his voice clear and steady. Kalen raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And what's going to be different this time, Earth Boy? Did you suddenly grow a spine?" "No," Izuku said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I'm just going to fly differently." He walked to the cockpit and climbed in, his movements sure and deliberate. Kalen watched him for a long moment before letting out an exasperated sigh and climbing in behind him. "Fine. One more time. But if you scratch the paint again, the repair bill is coming out of your rations." The canopy hissed shut. The starfield ignited around them. The neural link chimed, and the chaotic fire hose of data flooded his mind once more. It was just as overwhelming as before, a screaming tsunami of sensory input. But this time, Izuku didn't fight it. He didn't try to push it away. He followed All Might's advice. He closed his eyes. He let the G-forces press him into his seat. He let the noise wash over him. And he began to think. He pictured his mother's face, her worried smile as she handed him his lunch. He pictured the skyline of his city, the UA-high building gleaming in the distance, a symbol of the hero world he'd left behind. He pictured Uraraka's cheerful, determined face, her constant encouragement. He pictured the Earth as he had seen it from orbit, a fragile, irreplaceable jewel. He focused not on the asteroids he had to dodge, but on the starbase behind him that he had to protect. He wasn't here to get a high score. He was here to be a shield. Protect them. The thought wasn't a command. It was a plea. A prayer. And in the screaming chaos of his mind, something answered. The noise didn't stop, but it changed. The million random conversations resolved into a single, unified chorus. The screaming data points became whispers of guidance. He could feel a pilot's instinct, not his own, telling him to apply a touch of thrust to the port engine to counter a gravitational eddy. He felt the gunner's intuition, sharp and cold like Kalen's, highlighting a structural fracture in a nearby asteroid. He felt the collective calm of hundreds of pilots who had been in situations 1,000 times worse than this. He opened his eyes. The starfield was no longer a confusing mess. It was a tapestry of information he could read at a glance. The ship was no longer a wild beast. It was a part of him. The flight sticks were not tools, they were extensions of his will. The thrum of the engine was his own heartbeat. He felt the presence of the others. Not as ghosts, but as a quiet strength at the back of his mind. A Rylan ace, calm and precise. A Kthar brawler, aggressive and daring. A Signian strategist, patient and cunning. He was Izuku Midoriya, but he was also more. He was one, channeling the strength of all. Without conscious thought, his hands moved on the controls. The inheritor responded instantly, gracefully. He banked the ship, the movement so smooth that the G-forces were a gentle pressure, not a crushing weight. He weaved through the asteroid field, not as a series of jarring turns, but as a single, fluid dance. He was a river flowing around stones, his path effortless and perfect. Behind him, there was absolute silence. He pushed the ship faster, feeling its immense power begging to be unleashed. He saw a narrow, twisting canyon in a massive asteroid, a path no sane pilot would attempt. The instincts of the brawler pilot flared in his mind, a thrill of challenge. He dove in. The rock walls were a blur on either side. He rolled, pitched, and yawed, the ship moving as if it were alive, anticipating his every desire an instant before he was aware of it himself. He burst out of the other side of the canyon, and pulled the ship into a breathtaking loop, the starbase laid out perfectly below him. The ship hummed, its systems glowing with a calm, steady blue light. It felt content. Harmonized. Simulation complete. Kalen's voice finally came, but it was a choked, disbelieving whisper. He brought the inheritor to a gentle, perfect stop in the center of the chamber. The canopy opened. He looked back at his gunner. Kalen was staring at her console, then at him, her silver eyes wide with an emotion he had not seen before. All. The cynical mask was gone, shattered. She felt it. The change, the life in the machine. The impossible grace of his flight. He looked up at the control booth. Xyler was standing, his three-fingered hands pressed against the transparasteel, his double-lidded eyes unblinking. Izuku Midoriya took a deep, steady breath. The pilot's legacy was now his. He had passed the true test. He was no longer just a candidate. He was a starfighter. The briefing room was a cold, pragmatic space, a hemisphere of dark metal where the only light came from a massive holographic star chart that dominated the center. Constellations, tactical overlays, and threat-level indicators and ominous shades of red pulsed in the gloom. Izuku stood beside Kalen, his new flight suit feeling both alien and like a second skin. The nervous energy that had been his constant companion since arriving at Starbase Epsilon was still there, but it was different now. It was a coiled spring, not a quivering wreck. The memory of his successful simulation run, of the chorus of voices in his mind, was a bedrock of newfound confidence. Xyler stood before the chart, his elongated form casting a long shadow. His usual air of weary desperation was overlaid with a thin veneer of cautious optimism. "Your mission is straightforward," Xyler began, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber. He gestured, and the star chart zoomed in on a swirling, ethereal cloud of incandescent gas and dark matter. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a cosmic painting of violet, crimson, and gold. "This is the Seraphim's Veil, a Class 4 stellar nursery. It is dense with sensor-disrupting gases and gravimetric anomalies. For that reason, it serves as a common hiding place for Void Dominion scout patrols." He highlighted a flight path, a simple, looping trajectory around the nebula's periphery. "Your task is reconnaissance. A simple patrol. You will take the Inheritor along this designated path, running passive sensor sweeps. Identify any hostiles, record their numbers and class, and return. I must be clear, Starfighter, you are not to engage. This is a shakedown cruise, a chance for you and Gunner Kalen to find your rhythm in a live-fire environment. The goal is data collection, not confrontation." Izuku nodded, absorbing the information. His eyes traced the flight path, already running calculations in his head. The nebula's edge was turbulent. There would be pockets of dense hydrogen that could be ignited, crystalline asteroid fields that would play havoc with targeting locks, and plasma vents that could mask a ship's heat signature. It was a perfect place for an ambush. "With respect, Commander." Kalen's voice was a low, professional rasp, cutting through the formal briefing. "Sending a green pilot on his first run into the Veil, even for recon, is like teaching a pup to swim by tossing it into a whirlpool. The environment itself is as dangerous as any Reaper squadron. Your concerns are noted, Gunner," Xyler replied, his double-lidded eyes turning to her. "However, the Inheritor's unique sensor suite, when properly harmonized with its pilot, should be able to navigate the Veil's complexities. This is as much a test of the machine as it is of the team. We need to know its true capabilities." Kalen's silver eyes flickered to Izuku for a fraction of a second. She didn't say anything, but her message was clear: don't screw this up. The awe from his performance in the simulator had faded, replaced by a razor-sharp, professional scrutiny. He wasn't a prodigy to her anymore. He was a variable, an unknown quantity in a life-or-death equation, and she was watching to see if he would balance it or break it. "We understand the mission, Commander," Izuku said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "Log any hostiles. Do not engage. Return to base." Xyler gave a slight, formal nod. "May the stars guide you." Dismissed. The walk to the hangar was a silent one. The ambient noise of the starbase, the clang of metal, the hiss of pneumatics, the chatter of a dozen alien languages, seemed to fade into the background. Izuku's focus was entirely on the mission, on the colossal machine waiting for them. The Inheritor sat in its private bay, a slumbering predator under the cold, white lights. Ground crews were making final checks, their insected and reptilian forms scurrying around the landing gear. As they approached, Kalen stopped him with a four-fingered hand on his arm. "Listen to me, kid," she said, her voice low and intense. "Xyler may think this is a test flight. I think it's a death trap. The Veil is where they blood their new pilots, human and alien alike. If there are Dominion ships in there, they won't be old veterans. They'll be young, aggressive, and stupid, and that makes them unpredictable and dangerous." She stepped closer, her silver eyes locking onto his. In the simulator you were a ghost. You were perfect. But the void doesn't care about perfection. It punishes the slightest mistake with instant death. Out there, I am your eyes and your fangs. You fly the ship, you keep us alive. I'll handle the shooting. You listen to every word I say. You trust my targeting, and if I tell you to run, you push that throttle until the engines melt. Understand? I understand, Izuku said, meeting her gaze without wavering. I trust you, Kalen. The statement was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. It seemed to catch her off guard. A flicker of something, surprise, maybe even a sliver of respect, crossed her features before the cynical mask slammed back into place. Good, she grunted. Now let's try not to become another sad story they tell new recruits. The pre-flight check was a meticulous ritual. Kalen guided him through it, her voice a clipped, professional monologue in his ear as they sat in the cockpit. Power core is green. Life support nominal. Check your inertial dampeners, sync them to your suit's biomonitors. Good. Now cycle the shield emitters. Port, starboard, fore, aft, dorsal, ventral. Watch the energy flow on your console. Make sure there are no fluctuations. Izuku's hands moved across the holographic controls, his mind and body in perfect sync. This was not the clumsy, overwhelmed boy from the first simulation. He felt the ship's systems as if they were his own nervous system. He could feel the hum of the power core in his bones, the faint thrum of the shield emitters on his skin. The chorus of voices from the One for All legacy was quiet, a low, reassuring murmur at the back of his consciousness, waiting. All systems green, Izuku confirmed. Ready for launch. Hangar control, this is Inheritor, Kalen said into her comm. Requesting departure clearance. Mission profile, Recon 7, a distorted, clicking voice replied. Clearance granted, Inheritor. May your shields hold. Hangar doors opening, a section of the hangar floor slid away, revealing a magnetic launch rail that descended into the darkness of a launch tube. The Inheritor was lowered onto the rail with a heavy clang. Ahead, a series of massive, circular irises opened, revealing the stardusted void. Launch in 3, 2, 1. There was no roar of engines, no violent shudder. Just a powerful, silent surge of magnetic energy that catapulted them out of the starbase and into the silent majesty of space. The asteroid field that housed their hidden base fell away behind them, and ahead, the Seraphim's Veil loomed, a celestial titan of gas and fire. The journey was quiet. Izuku flew with a precision that felt both innate and learned, the combined experience of 100 pilots guiding his hands. Kalen remained silent, her attention focused on the long-range sensor displays that flickered in her gunner's station. As they neared the nebula's edge, the universe outside the cockpit transformed. They plunged into roiling clouds of crimson hydrogen, thick as fog. Ghostly tendrils of turquoise and gold gas, each one light-years long, drifted past them. Fields of crystalline asteroids glittered like diamonds scattered on black velvet, their sharp edges a constant threat. Sensor efficiency is dropping to 60%, Kalen reported, her voice tight. Too much interference. I'm switching to gravimetric and tachyon scans. It's less precise, but harder to jam. I can feel the gravimetric shears, Izuku murmured, his hands making minute adjustments to the thrusters. It's like flying through cross-currents. Just keep us stable, Kalen ordered. I'm getting something. Faint. A cluster of high-density metallic objects, dead ahead, hiding in that dark matter cloud. Izuku's eyes narrowed, focusing on the swirling patch of inky blackness. His own senses, augmented by the ship and the One for All legacy, felt it too. A wrongness, a cold, sharp presence in the beautiful chaos of the nebula. How many? He asked, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. Can't get a clear count. At least 4, maybe 5. Their energy signatures are masked. They're running cold. Waiting. It was a classic ambush. Izuku's mind raced, pulling up tactical data he'd memorized from the game, now reinforced by the instincts of seasoned warriors. A standard Dominion Reaper squadron is 5 ships. A V-formation attack from above is their preferred opening salvo. They lead with plasma torpedoes to soften the target's shields before closing in with particle repeaters. They know we're here, Izuku said, his voice low. Impossible, Kalen countered. We're running silent. Passive scans only. No, Izuku insisted, a cold certainty settling in his gut. They're not waiting for us. This is a hunting ground. They're just waiting. For anything. And we're about to fly right into their trap. As if summoned by his words, the trap sprang. From the heart of the dark matter cloud, 5 points of sickly violet light ignited. 5 void reaper fighters, shaped like jagged arrowheads or predatory insects, burst from their cover. They were exactly as Izuku had pictured them, but the reality was infinitely more terrifying. They moved with a twitchy, unnatural speed, their engines leaving faint, corrosive trails in the nebula's gas. Warning, multiple hostile targets detected. Weapons-grade energy signatures. The AI's voice was calm, but the blare of alarms that accompanied it was anything but. Shields to full power! Kalen yelled, her hands flying across her console. Evasive maneuvers, now! But Izuku was already moving. He slammed the sticks to the side, throwing the inheritor into a brutal, high-G dive. A volley of violet plasma torpedoes screamed through the space they had occupied a second before. The shockwaves from their detonation buffeted the ship, making the hull groan in protest. The fight was on. Chaos erupted. The Reapers broke formation and swarmed them, their particle repeaters stitching the space around the inheritor with incandescent violet energy. Impacts hammered against their shields like angry fists. The cockpit shook violently, and the steady blue of the consoles flickered to an angry red. Dorsal shield at 74%. Aft shield at 68%. For a terrifying moment, Izuku felt a flicker of the same panic from his first simulation. The sheer, overwhelming violence of the assault was stunning. This wasn't a game. That damage was real. The lives on the line were real. Then, the chorus in his mind rose to meet the challenge. The calm of the Rylan A settled over his fear. The fire of the Cthar brawler ignited his resolve. He wasn't just Izuku Midoriya, the scared kid from Earth, anymore. He was the pilot of the Inheritor. They're trying to flank us! Kalen shouted, her voice strained. 2 on the left, 3 on the right. I can't get a lock, they're too fast. Don't target them directly, Izuku said, his voice coming out sharp and commanding. He pulled the Inheritor into a tight loop, flying back towards the crystalline asteroid field they had just passed. Their formation is aggressive but sloppy. They're not coordinating. Target the lead ship on the right. Reaper 3. He's overextending, trying to show off. How can you possibly know that? Kalen demanded, but her hands were already moving, her targeting reticle slewing towards the designated ship. His engine burn is 10% hotter than the others, Izuku explained, his mind processing the flood of data with a clarity that amazed him. He's running without a governor. He's arrogant. I'm going to give you a firing solution. He veered the ship sharply, not away from the asteroids, but towards them. He flew perilously close to a massive, rotating crystal the size of a skyscraper. Kid, what are you doing? That thing will tear us apart. Trust me. Fire on my mark. Mark! Izuku fired a single, low-power burst from his forward cannons. It wasn't aimed at the Reaper. It was aimed at the crystal. The beam struck a facet and ricocheted at an impossible angle, striking the overeager Reaper 3 not in its shielded front, but in its vulnerable rear engine housing. The Reaper convulsed, its engines sputtering and dying. It began to spin uncontrollably, careening directly into the path of its wingman. The two ships collided in a silent, brilliant flash of violet and orange. 2X Reaper class destroyed. A small cheer erupted from somewhere in the back of Izuku's mind, the jubilant cry of the Cthar pilot. Kalen let out a sharp, astonished breath. Did you just pull a trick shot in the middle of a dogfight? Analysis and application. Izuku grunted, pulling them into a dive through a thick cloud of crimson gas. They're momentarily confused. Now's our chance to separate them. He pushed the throttle, using the gas cloud as cover. The 3 remaining Reapers plunged in after them, firing blindly. They're firing in a spread pattern, hoping to hit us. Izuku analyzed aloud, the words flowing as fast as his thoughts. Their comms are probably garbage in this soup. They're relying on visual contact. He looked at his energy readings. Kalen, prepare to vent the plasma conduits on my signal. A full, directed burst. Vent the plasma? That'll leave us a sitting duck for a full second, she protested. Just do it. They burst out of the far side of the gas cloud. As Izuku predicted, the three Reapers followed a moment later, still in a loose formation. Now! Izuku yelled. Kalen slammed a control. A brilliant, blinding flare of white-hot plasma erupted from the Inheritor's dorsal vents, mimicking the flash of a small sun. The Reaper pilots, their cockpits suddenly flooded with intense light, were momentarily blinded. Their ships wavered, their disciplined attack breaking into individual, panicked maneuvers. It was the opening Izuku needed. Target the one on the left, he commanded. I'll hold him steady. He threw the Inheritor into a gut-wrenching spin, lining up his ship so that the disoriented Reaper was perfectly centered in Kalen's sights. For a split second, the enemy pilot was a deer in the headlights. Kalen didn't waste it. A volley of concentrated particle cannon fire erupted from the Inheritor's turrets. The bolts slammed into the Reaper's cockpit, blowing it to pieces. One ex-Reaper class destroyed, but the other two had recovered. They screamed in, their weapons blazing with renewed fury. An energy bolt slammed into the Inheritor's port engine. The ship shuddered violently, and a high-pitched whine filled the cockpit. Warning, port engine damaged. Power output at 40%. Inertial dampeners fluctuating. We've lost maneuverability, Kalen shouted. We can't outrun them like this. We don't have to outrun them. Izuku gritted out, fighting the controls as the ship tried to pull to the left. His eyes darted across the battlefield, his mind a whirlwind of desperate calculation. He saw the two remaining Reapers, the damaged engine, their dwindling shield power. And he saw something else. A small, dense asteroid, glowing with a faint internal heat. A hydrogen core. Unstable. A crazy, one-in-a-million idea, born from the game's physics engine and refined by the daredevil instincts of a dead pilot, sparked in his mind. Kalen, he said, his voice eerily calm. I need you to do something for me. I need you to trust my math. I'm a little busy right now, kid. She shot back, her cannons firing wildly to keep the Reapers at bay. Fly through them. Straight at that glowing asteroid. On my mark, I want you to fire a single, full-power cannon blast directly into its core. You're insane! The resulting explosion will vaporize us along with them. No, it won't, Izuku said, his eyes glued to the trajectory display he was plotting in his head. The primary blast wave will be spherical. But there's a micro-fissure on the asteroid's northern pole. The secondary jet of energy will be directional. If we time it right, we can ride the shockwave out while the Reapers get caught in the main blast. It was the Kobayashi Maru all over again. An impossible plan that relied on perfect timing and flawless execution. Kalen was silent for a full second. Izuku could almost hear the calculations running through her head, the tactical officer weighing the impossible odds. The Reapers were closing in, their final attack run beginning. It was this or death. Fine, she finally bit out. But if I die, I'm haunting you. Give me the mark. Get ready, Izuku said. He aimed the nose of the crippled Inheritor straight at the asteroid, the two Reapers hot on their tail, sensing the kill. They think we're making a suicide run. They're getting greedy. Closer, closer. The asteroid filled their viewport, its heated core a baleful red eye. The Reapers were right behind them, almost close enough to touch. Detroit. Smash! Izuku screamed, the name of his hero's attack a primal roar of defiance. Now, Kalen! Kalen's fingers slammed the trigger. A single, brilliant beam of energy, the full, concentrated power of the Inheritor's main cannon, shot forward and plunged into the heart of the asteroid. For a split second, nothing happened. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, the asteroid swelled, turned pure white, and detonated. The explosion was not silent. Izuku felt it through the very atoms of the ship, a deep, cosmic thump that resonated in his bones. He had timed it perfectly. The main blast erupted outwards, a perfect sphere of incandescent energy that engulfed the two pursuing Reapers, vaporizing them instantly. Just as he had calculated, a jet of pure, white-hot energy erupted from the fissure on the asteroid's pole. The shockwave, a physical wall of force, slammed into the back of the Inheritor. The ship was thrown forward like a stone from a slingshot. Alarms screamed a symphony of impending doom. The damaged port engine sparked and died completely. The hull groaned under the strain, and for a terrifying moment, Izuku thought the ship would be torn apart. But it held. They were surfing a supernova, riding a wave of pure destruction to safety. Slowly, the incredible acceleration bled off. They drifted into a quiet, calm patch of the nebula, trailing smoke and debris. Behind them, the glorious, terrifying flower of the explosion slowly faded, leaving nothing but glittering stardust where the asteroid and the reapers had been. Silence. Profound, complete silence. The only sound in the cockpit was the ragged, gasping breaths of its two occupants. Izuku's entire body was trembling with adrenaline. His head was pounding. He slumped against his seat, every muscle aching. Status report. He managed to whisper, his voice hoarse. He heard a few clicks from the gunner's station. All hostiles eliminated. Kalen's voice was a strained, disbelieving murmur. Port engine is offline. Hull integrity at 12%. Life support is stable. We're alive. She paused. Somehow, they floated in silence for a long time, the beauty of the nebula a stark contrast to the violence they had just unleashed. That was not in the manual, Kalen finally said, her voice quiet. It was in the hero notebooks. Izuku mumbled, a weary, triumphant smile touching his lips. You're completely insane, she said. But for the first time, there was no venom in the words. There was no scorn. There was only a deep, profound, and grudging respect. You're the most insane, brilliant, suicidal pilot I have ever had the misfortune to fly with. She let out a short, sharp sound that might have been a laugh. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Izuku closed his eyes, the voices of the One for All legacy giving a final, faint cheer before receding into a peaceful hum. They had done it. They had survived their trial by fire. He had been tested not as a gamer, not as a prodigy, but as a pilot. And he had not been found wanting. The bond with his ship was forged. And in the crucible of that desperate battle, another bond had been forged as well, one of trust, respect, and shared survival, with the cynical, four-armed gunner who now had his back. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Izuku felt like he was truly a part of it. And he was ready for the next fight. The Inheritor hung in the main repair cradle of Starbase Epsilon like a wounded beast of prey. Its sleek, black hull was a mess of scorch marks, microfractures, and gaping wounds where void Reaper particle bolts had torn through the armor. The port engine was a mangled wreck of twisted conduits and shattered emitters. A four-armed, insectoid mechanic with glowing ocular lenses was delicately welding a new power coupling deep within its housing, the sizzle of the plasma torch echoing in the cavernous bay. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, ionized metal, and the strange, earthy smell of the Ryland coolant gel. Izuku sat on a nearby supply crate, a thermal blanket draped over his shoulders, watching the repairs with a strange sense of detachment. Every clang of a hydrospanner, every spark from a welder, felt like a procedure being performed on an extension of his own body. He could still feel the phantom vibrations of the battle, the memory of the G-forces, the ghost of the One for All chorus singing in his mind. It was a quiet hum now, a constant, comforting presence, but the intensity of the fight had left him with a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't seem to touch. He had been debriefed for hours by a stone-faced Xyler and a team of impassive Ryland tacticians. He and Kalen had recounted every detail of the ambush, every maneuver, every shot fired. His trick shot with the crystal asteroid and his final, desperate gamble with the hydrogen core had been analyzed, replayed on holographic displays, and cross-referenced with stellar physics models. The Ryland tacticians had looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and reverence, as if he were some kind of tactical savant, a living probability engine. They didn't understand. It wasn't just him. It was the legacy in his head, the calm strategist who saw the ricochet, the daring brawler who saw the explosion, all of them guided by his own desperate need to protect his new, four-armed partner. Kalen, for her part, had given her report with clipped, professional accuracy, downplaying his insanity and focusing on the results. But every so often during the debriefing, Izuku had caught her looking at him, her silver eyes holding a complex cocktail of emotions he couldn't yet decipher. The scorn was gone, replaced by a grudging respect, but there was something else, too. A flicker of caution, perhaps, the kind of look you give a powerful, unpredictable weapon you're not sure is entirely safe to wield. Starfighter. Izuku looked up. Xyler was approaching, his slender form moving with its usual silent grace. The commander's face was, as always, difficult for a human to read, but the slight relaxation around his eyes suggested a measure of relief. The data you recovered on the Reaper's particle repeaters is invaluable, Xyler said, his translated voice calm. Their energy modulation frequencies are different from our previous encounters. The Dominion is adapting. Your mission, while deviating from its parameters, has provided us with a crucial tactical update. Izuku flinched at the phrase. Deviating from its parameters. It was a gentle way of saying directly disobeying a direct order. I'm sorry, Commander. We were ordered not to engage. You were ambushed. Xyler corrected him, a hint of something almost like warmth in his tone. Your survival and the destruction of an entire enemy squadron was an outcome beyond our most optimistic projections. You did well, Izuku Midoriya. You have proven yourself worthy of the Inheritor. The praise felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. He had just been trying to stay alive. When will the repairs be finished? The engine requires a full rebuild, and the hull matrix needs to be realigned. 3 standard rotations at least, Xyler said. He paused, his large, black eyes studying Izuku's weary face. This downtime is a necessary respite. For the ship and for its pilot. Your biomonitors indicate elevated stress levels and sleep deprivation. You are far from your home, from your support structure. This is detrimental to a pilot's long-term combat effectiveness. Xyler manipulated a small, flat device he held in his 3-fingered hand. We have allocated you a communication slot. The starbase can open a micro-wormhole transmission channel back to your home system. The signal will be heavily filtered, encrypted, and bounced through several dead systems to prevent tracking. There will be a significant temporal delay, and you cannot transmit any sensitive data, but you will be able to send and receive a message. Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. A message home. The thought was a sudden, dizzying rush of longing and relief. His mom. He could talk to his mom. Thank you, Commander, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Rest, Starfighter, Xyler said, placing a cool, dry hand on his shoulder for a brief moment. The war will still be here when you wake. The communications room was a small, soundproofed alcove off the main command center. A single console with a large holographic display dominated the space. Izuku sat before it, his hands trembling slightly as he initiated the sequence Xyler had shown him. The screen flickered to life, showing a swirling vortex of blue light as the micro-wormhole stabilized. The temporal delay was 87 seconds each way. It wouldn't be a conversation. It would be an exchange of recorded moments, a painful reminder of the light years that separated them. He took a shaky breath and hit record. The icon pulsed, and he was live. He saw his own face reflected in the dark screen, pale, tired, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing a strange alien uniform. He tried to force a smile. Hi, Mom, he began, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. Hi. It's me. I'm okay. I'm doing well. This study abroad program is incredible. The technology here it's beyond anything I could have imagined. He was a terrible liar. He stared at his hands, trying to find the words. The food is different, he continued, grasping for some semblance of normalcy. But I'm eating, I promise. And the work is really challenging. Advanced astrophysics and engineering. It's keeping me busy. I'm learning a lot. He looked back up at the screen, trying to project a sincerity he didn't feel. I miss you. A lot. I miss your Katsudan. I think about it all the time. Please don't worry about me. The people I'm with are taking good care of me. It's a very safe program. The lie felt like acid on his tongue. He had almost been vaporized less than a day ago. I have to go, he finished, his throat tightening. They don't give us much time on these long-distance calls. I love you. I'll be home as soon as I can. I promise. Be brave, okay? He ended the recording and sent it, watching as a progress bar slowly filled, marking his message's impossible journey across the stars. Then, he waited. The 87 seconds of silence stretched into an eternity. He counted each one, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Finally, the screen chimed. Incoming message. He hit play, and his mother's face filled the screen. She was in their kitchen, the familiar floral wallpaper and mismatched mugs on the shelf behind her. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, but the moment she saw his recording, her face crumpled with a wave of raw, overwhelming relief. Izuku! Oh, my baby! Her voice was choked with tears, and the sound shattered his heart. She was pressing her hand to the screen, as if she could somehow touch him. You're okay. Oh, thank goodness you're okay. She took a moment to compose herself, wiping at her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. Oh, you look so tired, sweetie. Are you sleeping enough? I hope they're feeding you properly. Astrophysics, my goodness, that sounds so difficult. You were always so smart. She listened to his message, her expression a painful mix of love, worry, and a desperate willingness to believe his flimsy story. She nodded along to his lies, her smile trembling. We miss you too, Izuku. The apartment is so quiet without you mumbling about your heroes all the time, she said, a watery chuckle escaping her lips. I made katsudon last night. I'll make it for you every day when you get back. Her expression grew serious, her eyes searching his, even across the impossible gulf of space and time. This program, it's safe, isn't it, Izuku? You promise me you're being safe? That's all that matters. Just come home. Come home safe, my hero. The message ended. The screen went dark. Izuku sat in the silence, tears streaming freely down his face. The weight of his lie, of the danger he was in, of the worry he was causing her, crashed down on him. Her final words, my hero, echoed in the chamber. He was fighting to protect her, but every moment he was out here, he was breaking her heart. The homesickness was a physical ache, a hollow space in his chest that felt as vast and cold as the void outside. He stayed there for a long time, until the screen timed out and the room was plunged into darkness, leaving him alone with the echoes of a world he wasn't sure he would ever see again. The ache didn't fade. It followed him back to his stark quarters, a constant, low-frequency hum of grief beneath the surface of his thoughts. He felt disconnected, adrift. His conversation with his mother had only amplified his isolation. She was his past, his anchor to everything he had been. But he needed something else. A connection to the future he was fighting for, a voice from his own generation. An idea sparked, a wild, reckless thought born of loneliness. During the mission monitoring the comms, he noticed something, a low priority, heavily encrypted civilian network the Star League used for deep space communications between its few remaining colonies. It was slow, antiquated, and probably not monitored as closely as the military channels. He found Kaylin in the mess hall, if the small alcove with nutrient paste dispensers could be called that. She was sitting alone, sharpening her combat knife with a whetstone, the rhythmic shing 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 a clear, do not disturb sign. He hesitated, then approached. Kaylin? She didn't look up. What do you want, kid? I need your help with something, he said, his voice low. I need to access a civilian comms channel. A specific frequency band on the Earth network. Now she looked up, her silver eyes instantly suspicious. Don't even think about it. Unsanctioned off-world communication is a court-martial offense. Xyler gave you your one call. You're done. It's not for me. He lied, then immediately corrected himself. Okay, it is for me, but not in the way you think. It's tactical. She stopped sharpening the knife, her gaze flat and unimpressed. Tactical homesickness? That's a new one. No, Izuku insisted, leaning forward, his voice earnest. A morale anchor. A reminder. We're out here fighting things. It's easy to forget what a normal day even looks like. It's easy for the fight to become the only thing that's real. I just need to hear a voice that reminds me what we're fighting for. It helps maintain psychological stability for high-stress operatives. He was pulling the jargon out of thin air, trying to frame his desperate, Emotional need in a language she, a soldier, would understand. Kaylin stared at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. She was looking for a flaw in his logic, a hint of deception. But all she saw was a tired, lonely kid trying to justify a need to hear a friendly voice. She had felt that same gnawing loneliness for years, ever since Cygnus X1 had gone dark. She let out a long, weary sigh, a sound of profound resignation. You're going to be the death of me, Midoriya. One way or another. She stood up, tucking the knife away. Fine. One call. 5 minutes max? I can slice a path through the firewalls and mask the signal's point of origin, but it'll be messy. Expect static and lag. And if we get caught, I was never here. You stole my access codes while I was asleep. Got it? A wave of gratitude so intense it almost made him dizzy washed over Izuku. Got it. Thank you, Kaylin. Don't thank me. She grumbled, already walking towards the command center. Just don't say anything stupid that'll get a Dominion listening post interested in your backwater planet. An hour later, Izuku was back in the comms alcove. This time Kaylin was with him, her 4 hands a blur across a holographic interface, bypassing security protocols and rerouting data streams with a fluid, practiced expertise. Okay, she said, her voice tense. I have a window. It's unstable. Punch in the destination code. You've got 5 minutes before the network's diagnostic AI flags this channel. Izuku typed in the only contact code he had memorized besides his own home, Ochako Uraraka's. The screen filled with static, a roaring hiss of white noise. A faint, distorted ringing sound echoed through the speakers. Izuku held his breath. Suddenly, the static cleared for a moment, and a pixelated image of Uraraka's face appeared. She was in her room, a cheerful, pink space Izuku had only seen glimpses of at school. She looked confused, tapping at her phone. Hello? Hello? Weird number. Is anyone there? Her voice was distorted, cutting in and out. Uraraka-san? Izuku said, leaning close to the microphone. Can you hear me? The image froze, then updated. Her eyes were wide with shock. Deku-kun? Is that you? Where are you? Everyone's been so worried. You just vanished. I'm okay, he said, a real, genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time in what felt like weeks. I'm okay. I'm on a study abroad program. It's really remote. The connection is terrible. Study abroad? Is that what they're calling it? It must be top secret. Are you okay? You look really tired, she said, her natural empathy cutting through the static. It's a lot more intense than I expected, he admitted. But I'm managing. How is everyone? How is school? Her face lit up. Oh, you know. The usual. Aizawa-sensei is still sleeping in class, Ida-kun is still trying to get everyone to follow the rules perfectly, and Kaken, well, he's still Kaken. He aced the last combat simulation at the EDC Academy. But he looked madder than ever about it. The mention of their normal lives, of their friends, was a balm to his soul. It was the echo of Earth he had so desperately needed to hear. It was real. It was still there. It was what he was protecting. We're learning about zero-gravity rescue techniques, she chattered on, her enthusiasm infectious even through the bad connection. It's really cool. You have to recalibrate your whole sense of balance. I think I have a bit of an advantage, he laughed, a real, honest laugh. Yeah, I bet you do. So this program? She asked, her expression turning serious again. Is it what you wanted? Is it helping you become a hero? The question struck him with surprising force. He looked around the cold, metal room, thought of the terrifying reapers and the fury of the battle. Was this what he wanted? I don't know, he answered honestly. It's harder than I ever imagined. And scarier. Sometimes I'm not sure I'm cut out for it. The connection flickered badly, her image dissolving into a mess of colored squares. Kaylin tapped his shoulder. 1 minute. Uraraka-san, he said quickly, needing to ask one more thing. Can I ask you something? Why do you want to be a hero? The static cleared just enough for him to see her thoughtful expression. She didn't give a grand, philosophical answer. She just smiled, a simple, warm, genuine smile. For my parents, she said, her voice clear for a perfect, fleeting moment. They've worked so hard their whole lives. I just want to earn enough so they can finally take it easy. I want to see them happy, that's all. Her answer was so simple, so pure, so grounded. It wasn't about fame, or power, or saving the universe. It was about helping the people you love. In that moment, she recentered him. She cut through all the galactic stakes, the alien technology, the impossible pressure, and reminded him of the one, simple truth at the heart of all heroism. You do it for other people. That's a great reason, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Deku-kun, you're cutting out, she said, her voice panicked as the signal began to fail completely. Whatever you're doing, be careful. And come back soon. We miss you. Go beyond, plus, ultra. The last word was lost in a final, deafening roar of static. The screen went black. The connection was severed. Kalen killed the power, her movements swift. That was 5 minutes and 14 seconds. You owe me 14 seconds of your life. But Izuku was barely listening. He was staring at the blank screen, Uraraka's cheerful voice still echoing in his ears. He felt lighter. The crushing weight of his duty, the homesickness, the fear, it was all still there, but it wasn't burying him anymore. He had his anchor. He had his reminder. He was a starfighter, a soldier in a galactic war. But he was also Deku, the boy who wanted to help. And thanks to a friend's voice across the void, he finally remembered that those two things were one and the same. Earth. Earth Defense Corps Academy, Musutifa Sector. The simulator cockpit was state-of-the-art Earth technology, which meant it was a clunky, claustrophobic tin can. Katsuki Bakugo didn't care. His hands flew across the controls, his movements a blur of controlled aggression. On the panoramic screen before him, 5 hostile drones engaged in a pincer movement. Pathetic. Targeting solution locked. Firing plasma volley. He snarled to the empty cockpit. He slammed the firing stud. Twin bolts of orange energy screamed across the screen, vaporizing 2 drones. He pushed the throttle, his EDF Raptor 3 fighter groaning under the strain, and closed the distance on the remaining 3. A flick of the wrist, a perfectly timed missile launch, and the simulation was over. Mission complete. Time, 47.3 seconds. New Academy record. Bakugo ripped off his helmet and threw it against the side of the cockpit with a frustrated roar. Fucking flying bricks! He yelled. The Raptor 3 was the best fighter the EDC had, and it handled like a cargo hauler with a broken stabilizer. It was slow, its weapons were underpowered, and its shield capacity was a joke. Achieving a new record in this piece of junk felt less like a victory and more like an insult. He stormed out of the simulator bay, ignoring the odd looks of the junior cadets and the approving nod from his instructor. He was the best pilot they had. The best they'd ever had. A prodigy with a powerful quirk, perfect reflexes, and an instinct for combat that couldn't be taught. And it was all being wasted flying these goddamn museum pieces. His frustration wasn't just about the tech. It was an annoying, irritating puzzle that had been chewing at the back of his mind for weeks. A puzzle named Deku. The official story was that Izuku Midoriya had been accepted into a highly exclusive and confidential international study program. It was bullshit, and Bakugo knew it. Deku was quirkless. Useless. He couldn't pass the physical for a standard hero course, let alone get into some super-secret program. Yet he had vanished. Not even his mother seemed to know exactly where he was. It made no sense, and things that didn't make sense pissed Bakugo off. He stalked through the sterile, polished halls of the academy, his mind racing. He bypassed the main command center and headed for the sub-level maintenance bays, a place that smelled of grease and burnt wiring. He found who he was looking for, Chief Engineer Kenji Tanaka, a grizzled old man with a permanent scowl and more cybernetic replacement parts than original ones. Chief! Bakugo grunted, leaning against the old man's workstation. Kenji didn't look up from the diagnostic he was running on a faulty plasma conduit. What do you want, Prodigy? Come to complain about the inertial dampeners on Simulator 4 again? I want to see the deep space sensor logs from the last month, Bakugo said, cutting to the chase. All of them. Unfiltered. Kenji finally looked up, his one organic eye narrowing. That's classified. And boring. It's 99% solar flares and sensor ghosts. Why, I keep hearing chatter, Bakugo said, lowering his voice. The long-range comms guys telling jokes about cosmic glitches, technicians in sensor calibration complaining about energy readings that don't match any known phenomena. I want to see for myself, the old engineer sighed, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He'd been with the EDC since its inception. He'd seen things the higher-ups like to sweep under the rug. The brass won't like it, they call it data pollution. Faulty equipment, they say. Easier than admitting they don't know what the hell they're looking at. He gestured with his head towards a dusty, forgotten terminal in the corner. Knock yourself out. But you didn't get the access codes from me. For the next 2 hours, Bakugo was glued to the terminal. He cross-referenced star charts, atmospheric data, and deep space telemetry, his mind working with a ferocious intensity. And he found them, the glitches. They were tiny, almost imperceptible. A momentary spike in neutrino emissions from a dead sector of space. A bizarre, localized gravitational warp near Jupiter that lasted for less than 3 seconds. A burst of high-frequency energy from the Oort cloud that didn't match any known celestial event. Each one, on its own, was nothing. An anomaly. A glitch. But when Bakugo plotted them on a timeline, a pattern emerged. A faint, almost invisible trail of impossible physics, leading from deep space, making a brief stop right over Mizurufu, Japan, and then heading back out towards the Aldebaran sector. The stop over Mizurufu coincided with the exact day Deku had disappeared. His blood ran cold. It was impossible. It was insane. But the data was right there. He took his findings to his commanding officer, Commander Takami, a stern, by-the-book man whose ambition far outstripped his imagination. Takami listened to Bakugo's frantic explanation with a patient, condescending smile. "Cadet Bakugo," Takami said, steepling his fingers. "Your diligence is commendable. However, you are connecting unrelated sensor malfunctions. We have a limited budget. Some of our deep space arrays are decades old. They produce false positives. It's as simple as that." "This isn't a false positive." Bakugo slammed his hand on the commander's desk. "This is a trail. Something came here, and it took Deku, Midoriya, the quirkless boy from your file?" Takami's smile tightened. "And what, pray tell, would some advanced, faster-than-light entity want with a quirkless teenager?" The question hung in the air, a perfect, logical dismissal of everything Bakugo was trying to say. He had no answer. It was the part of the puzzle that made no sense. "With all due respect, sir, you're not listening." "No, cadet, you are not listening." Takami's voice turned to steel. "You are a pilot. A very good one. You are not an intelligence analyst. You will cease this extracurricular investigation immediately. Focus on your training." "That is an order." Bakugo stormed out of the office, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He was shaking with a rage that was cold and sharp. They were blind. Idiots, sitting here in their shiny academy, polishing their useless ships, while something was happening out there. Something big. That night, he stood alone in the academy's observatory deck, staring up at the stardusted sky. They had laughed at him. Dismissed him. But he knew, he felt it in his gut, a burning certainty that was as real as his own quirk. Deku was out there somewhere, tangled up in whatever had left those impossible footprints in the fabric of space. And the quirkless, useless Deku had been chosen for it. Not him. Katsuki Bakugo. The prodigy, the best. He stared up at the constellation of Aldebaran, a fierce, predatory glint in his crimson eyes. "Whatever you're doing out there, you damn nerd," he whispered to the uncaring stars. "Don't think for a second that this is your story." He wouldn't be left behind. He would find out the truth. And he would prove to the world, and to the entire goddamn universe, that he was the one who should have been chosen.